The strange thing wasn't that Damian Romano noticed the bruise. It was that he looked at it like he already knew the story behind it. The coffee in my paper cup had gone cold almost an hour ago, but I kept carrying it around the restaurant anyway. It gave my hands something to do besides shake. Friday nights at Bellamy's were always busy. The kind of busy where wealthy people laughed too loudly, expensive glasses clinked together, and waitresses like me moved so fast our feet hurt before the dinner rush was even halfway over. I adjusted the sleeve of my black uniform for what felt like the 100th time that night. The fabric covered my wrist perfectly. At least I hoped it did. I checked it 3 times in the bathroom mirror before my shift started. Maybe 4. I was 27 years old, working double shifts while finishing nursing school, and somehow I still felt like a frightened teenager whenever anyone looked too closely at me. "Olivia, table 14 needs refills," my manager called from across the room. "Got it." I forced a smile onto my face and grabbed a tray. Smile. Walk. Serve. Repeat. It was easier when I focused on the routine. Easier when I didn't think about anything outside these walls. The dining room buzzed with conversation beneath warm golden lights. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished wood floors. Everything looked beautiful from a distance. Most things do. Table 14 sat in the private section near the back. 4 men occupied the booth. Dark suits. Expensive watches. The kind of people who looked like they belonged in magazines instead of restaurants. The man sitting at the head of the table didn't look up when I approached. He was scrolling through something on his phone, expression unreadable. Dark hair. Sharp jawline. Calm posture. The kind of confidence that didn't need attention because it already owned the room. Damian Romano. I'd heard the name before. Everyone in Manhattan had. Some people spoke it with admiration. Others lowered their voices when they said it. I focused on the water glasses instead. "Can I get anyone anything else?" I asked. One of the men requested another bottle of sparkling water. Another ordered espresso. Routine. Normal. Safe. I reached forward to collect an empty glass. The edge of my tray shifted unexpectedly. Instinctively, I grabbed for it. My sleeve slid back. Just an inch. Maybe less. But it was enough. I fixed it immediately. Too late. I felt it before I saw it. Someone watching. My stomach tightened. Slowly, I looked up. Damian wasn't looking at his phone anymore. His eyes were fixed on my wrist. Not curious. Not judgmental. Focused. Like he'd noticed something important. The restaurant noise seemed farther away suddenly. My pulse quickened. I lowered my arm. "Excuse me," I said softly. None of the other men appeared to notice anything unusual. But Damian continued watching me. Then he set his phone down. "Mississippi." His voice was calm. Deep. Controlled. I stopped walking. Every instinct told me to keep moving. Instead, I turned back. "Yes." His gaze remained steady. Not on my face. On my wrist. On the place I'd tried so hard to hide. Then he asked a single question. 4 simple words. "Who did that?" My heart stopped. Not because of the question itself. Because of the way he asked it. As if he already knew the answer wasn't going to be the truth. I should have walked away. I should have laughed, blamed a cabinet door, and disappeared into the safety of another table. Instead, I stood there holding an empty tray while Damian Romano waited for an answer. For words. That was all he had asked. Yet somehow they felt heavier than anything anyone had said to me in months. "I bumped into a door," I replied. The lie came automatically. Smooth. Practiced. Familiar. I even managed a small smile. The kind people use when they want a conversation to end. One of the men at the table chuckled softly and returned to his drink. Another checked his phone. To everyone else, the moment was already over. But Damian did not look away. His eyes remained fixed on mine. Calm. Patient. Almost frustratingly patient. Like a man waiting for the truth to catch up with a lie. "A door," he repeated. I nodded. "Yes." He leaned back slightly in his chair. Expensive suit. Perfect posture. Not a single sign of emotion on his face. But something had changed in his expression. Something distant. As if he was no longer looking at me. As if he was remembering someone else. The silence stretched long enough to make my pulse climb. Then he finally gave a small nod. Of course. Relief rushed through me so quickly my knees almost felt weak. He believed me. Or at least he was willing to let me pretend he did. "Can I get anything else for you?" I asked. "No." His voice remained calm. "Thank you, Olivia." My stomach tightened instantly. I had never introduced myself. The name tag pinned to my uniform suddenly felt too small to explain how unsettling it was hearing my name in his voice. "Have a good evening, sir." I turned and walked away before he could say anything else. The moment I reached the service station near the kitchen, I exhaled. My hands trembled slightly as I grabbed a pitcher of water. "You okay?" my coworker Jenna asked. "You look pale." "Just tired." She glanced toward the private section. "Those guys bothering you?" I followed her gaze. Damian was speaking quietly with the others now, completely composed, completely normal, as though our conversation had never happened. "No," I said. "Everything is fine." Jenna gave me a doubtful look, but returned to her tables. "Everything is fine." The sentence echoed inside my head. Funny how easily people say those words. Funny how rarely they are true. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of orders, receipts, and forced smiles. Every time I entered the dining room, I told myself not to look toward Damian's table. Every time, I failed. And every time, I found him doing something unexpected. Not watching me constantly. Not staring. Somehow that would have been easier. Instead, he only looked occasionally. A glance here. A glance there. Like someone solving a puzzle piece by piece. Around 10:30, his group stood to leave. Relief immediately washed through me. Good. They were leaving. The strange encounter would become another memory. Another thing to forget. I was clearing dishes near the front entrance when they passed. Damian stopped beside me. Not close enough to be inappropriate. Just close enough for me to hear him. "Take care of yourself tonight, Olivia." I froze. Before I could respond, he continued walking toward the exit. The glass doors opened. Cold Manhattan air rushed inside. And for reasons I could not explain, those 6 words followed me for the rest of the night. I slept almost 3 hours that night, which was better than usual. Worse than normal. Damian Romano's voice kept replaying in my head every time I closed my eyes. "Take care of yourself tonight, Olivia." Such a simple thing to say. The kind of thing people said every day without thinking. Yet somehow it felt different coming from him. Maybe because he had looked directly at me when he said it. Maybe because I had the strange feeling he meant it. Saturday mornings were usually my favorite part of the week. Nursing classes started later. The restaurant did not open until lunch. For a few hours, I could pretend life was normal. I sat near the window of a small coffee shop 2 blocks from campus, reviewing patient care notes while sunlight spilled across the table. Outside, New York moved at its usual pace. Horns, footsteps, delivery trucks. Life. Normal life. The kind people rarely appreciate until it feels far away. My phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. "Hope you are having a better day." I stared at it. The number was unfamiliar. No name attached. No explanation. Just one sentence. My stomach tightened. For a moment, panic flashed through me. Then another message appeared. "Do not worry. Nothing is wrong. I simply wanted to check on you." My fingers froze above the screen. There was only one person I could imagine sending something like that. Yet I had never given him my number. A minute later, another message arrived. "Damian Romano. Now you know who this is." I actually laughed. Quietly. Against my better judgment. The absurd confidence of introducing himself after already proving he had found my number somehow felt very Damian. I should have blocked him immediately. Any reasonable person would have. Instead, I stared at the message for nearly a full minute. Then I typed 3 words. "How did you?" Before I could finish the sentence, another message appeared. "You work in Manhattan." "I own businesses in Manhattan." "Information travels." Fair enough. I deleted my unfinished reply. A few seconds later, another text arrived. "I apologize if this feels intrusive. I simply wanted to know whether you are okay." Nobody had asked me that in a long time. Not really. Friends asked how work was. Professors asked about grades. Customers asked for refills. But okay was different. Okay required honesty. And honesty was dangerous. I locked my phone and slipped it into my bag. Better to ignore it. Better to keep distance between myself and a man whose name made people lower their voices. That plan lasted exactly 6 hours. Around 6 in the evening, I arrived for my shift at Bellamy's. The moment I entered the staff room, Jenna looked up from her locker. "Olivia, do you know somebody named Romano?" My heartbeat stumbled. "Why?" Jenna pointed toward the front office. "There is a flower arrangement out there bigger than my first apartment." I stared at her. "What?" She laughed. "Go look." Against my better judgment, I did. The arrangement sat on the manager's desk. White lilies. Simple. Elegant. No hearts. No romantic message. just a small card tucked between the flowers. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was neat, almost formal. There was only one sentence. Doors do not leave bruises. My breath caught. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Beneath the sentence was a phone number. And for the first time since meeting Damian Romano, I realized he had not forgotten our conversation. Not even for a second. I should have thrown the card away. That would have been the smart thing to do. Instead, I slipped it into the pocket of my apron and spent the next 4 hours pretending it was not there. Every time I reached for my order pad, my fingers brushed against the thick paper. Every time, my heartbeat sped up. Doors do not leave bruises. 3 days earlier, those words would have made me angry. Now they made me tired. Because deep down, I knew Damian Romano was not accusing me of lying. He was telling me he understood the truth. The problem was that I did not understand why he cared. By the time my shift ended, rain was falling across Manhattan. The sidewalks reflected yellow taxi lights and glowing storefronts like broken pieces of glass. I pulled my jacket tighter and started the 6-block walk to my apartment. The air smelled like wet pavement and coffee from a late-night cafe on the corner. Normally, I loved the city at night. Normally, the noise made me feel less alone. That night, everything felt heavier. My phone buzzed inside my purse. I ignored it. It buzzed again, then a third time. Finally, I stopped beneath the awning of a closed bookstore and checked the screen. 3 messages from Ethan. Where are you? Why are you not answering? Call me. I closed my eyes. The familiar knot formed in my stomach. Not fear exactly. Exhaustion. The kind that comes from knowing every conversation will somehow become your fault. Another message arrived before I could put the phone away. We need to talk tonight. I stared at the words while rain drummed against the metal awning overhead. Then I slipped the phone back into my purse and kept walking. My apartment sat on the 4th floor of an aging brick building in Queens. The radiator rattled. The hallway smelled faintly of old paint. Home was not impressive, but it was mine. At least that was what I told myself. I had just unlocked my door when my phone rang again. This time it was not Ethan. The number was unfamiliar. For some reason, I already knew who it was. I answered before I could change my mind. Hello. Silence for half a second. Then Damian's voice. Calm. Steady. You kept the card. I leaned against the doorframe. You seem very confident. No. Just observant. Rain tapped against the hallway window nearby. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Why are you doing this? I finally asked. Doing what? Checking on me. Sending flowers. Calling. Another pause. Longer this time. Because nobody checked on someone when they should have. The answer caught me off guard. There was no arrogance in his voice. No manipulation. Just something unexpectedly honest. You do not even know me. Maybe not. His voice softened slightly. But I know what it looks like when someone spends all their energy convincing the world they are fine. I swallowed hard. Suddenly the hallway felt too quiet. Too small. Too close. I have to go, I whispered. Olivia. My hand tightened around the phone. Yes. If you ever need help, call me before things become harder than they already are. I did not answer. I could not. Because for the first time in a very long time, someone had spoken to me as though they could see straight through the smile I wore every day. And the frightening part was not that Damian Romano saw it. The frightening part was that I wanted to believe him. The next 3 days passed without another call from Damian. No messages. No flowers. No mysterious appearances. Part of me felt relieved. The other part kept checking my phone anyway. It was ridiculous. I barely knew him. Yet somehow his silence felt louder than his attention ever had. Monday afternoon brought one of those gray New York skies that seemed permanently stuck between rain and sunlight. I finished class, grabbed a coffee, and headed toward the subway station with my backpack slung over one shoulder. The city moved around me in a blur of hurried footsteps and distant sirens. Everyone rushing somewhere. Everyone carrying something invisible. My phone buzzed as I descended the station stairs. Ethan. I stared at the name until the ringing stopped. Seconds later, it started again. Then again. I finally answered. What? The frustration in my voice surprised even me. Silence greeted me at first. Then a sigh. Olivia, we need to talk. I closed my eyes. I am busy. You have been busy for days. Because I have a life. Another pause. The conversation felt familiar in all the worst ways. Like stepping onto a path that always led to the same place. I am outside your apartment, he said finally. My stomach dropped. What? I thought we could talk in person. The train roared into the station behind me. People surged forward toward the doors. My pulse quickened. You should have asked first. Why are you acting like this? Because I was tired. Because every conversation felt heavier than the last. Because for the first time in years, someone had asked whether I was okay instead of demanding that I prove it. But I did not say any of those things. I have classwork to finish, I replied. I cannot do this today. I hung up before he could answer. The train ride home felt endless. By the time I reached Queens, darkness had settled over the neighborhood. The streetlights cast long reflections across wet sidewalks. My apartment building stood exactly where it always had. Familiar. Ordinary. Yet my chest tightened when I spotted a figure near the entrance. Ethan. Waiting. I slowed my pace. For a brief moment I considered turning around and spending the night somewhere else. Then I remembered I was exhausted. I just wanted to go home. As I approached, Ethan stepped forward. His expression softened immediately. There you are. I forced a polite smile. Hi. The conversation that followed was not dramatic. No raised voices. No scene. Somehow that made it worse. Apologies. Promises. Explanations. The same cycle wrapped in slightly different words. I listened because that was easier than arguing. Easier than explaining why something inside me had changed. Eventually he left. The moment he disappeared around the corner, I released a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I opened the message. Is he gone? I stopped walking. My heartbeat stumbled. Another message appeared before I could respond. The black sedan across the street. Do not panic. I looked up instinctively. Parked beneath a street lamp sat a black car. Its windows were dark. Familiar. Suddenly, another text arrived. You looked uncomfortable. I wanted to make sure you got home safely. I stared at the screen. Then at the car. Then back at the screen. Before I could type a response, one final message appeared. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stop accepting what hurts them. The black sedan pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic, leaving me standing alone beneath the streetlight with a phone in my hand and a question I was no longer sure how to ignore. For the next 2 days, I could not stop thinking about that message. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stop accepting what hurts them. The words followed me everywhere. Through lectures. Through shifts at the restaurant. Through the quiet moments when I sat alone in my apartment pretending to study while my mind wandered somewhere else entirely. Wednesday evening arrived with heavy clouds hanging over the city. Bellamy's was unusually busy. Every table was full. Every server was moving twice as fast as normal. By 9 o'clock, my feet hurt and my smile felt painted on. Exactly the way most nights felt. I was carrying a tray of desserts toward the dining room when Jenna appeared beside me. You have a visitor. I nearly dropped the tray. What? She pointed toward the front entrance. Do not look so nervous. He is ridiculously handsome. My heart immediately knew before my eyes confirmed it. Damian stood near the entrance, speaking quietly with the manager. Dark suit. Calm posture. Completely at ease in a room where everyone else seemed slightly intimidated by his presence. I quickly looked away. Too late. He had already seen me. 20 minutes later, I found myself approaching his table with a fresh cup of coffee. Good evening, I said professionally. Damian glanced up from the document he had been reading. Olivia. Somehow hearing my name still affected me. Can I get you anything else? I asked. Actually, yes. I waited. He folded the document and set it aside. 5 minutes of honesty. I stared at him. That is not on the menu. A faint smile appeared. The first genuine smile I had ever seen from him. It transformed his entire face. Made him seem younger somehow. Less intimidating. More human. Then maybe I should order dessert instead. Against my better judgment, I laughed. A real laugh. Small but real. The sound surprised both of us. The smile lingered in his eyes afterward. There it is, he said quietly. What? The version of you that exists when you are not pretending everything is fine. The words struck deeper than they should have. I looked away immediately. I have work to do. Olivia. I stopped. You deserve better than survival. My chest tightened. You do not know anything about my life. You are right. His voice remained calm. I only know what I see. I should have walked away. Instead, I heard myself ask a question I had not planned to ask. And what exactly do you see? The restaurant noise seemed to fade around us. Damian studied me for several seconds. Not my appearance. Not my uniform. Me. Someone who apologizes too often. My throat tightened. Someone who expects disappointment before kindness. I could not speak. Someone who has forgotten that peace is supposed to feel normal. The words landed one after another with frightening accuracy. I looked down at the coffee cup in my hands because meeting his eyes suddenly felt impossible. "You are wrong," I whispered. "Maybe." His voice softened. "But I do not think so." My phone buzzed inside my apron pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I already knew who it was without checking. Damian noticed the change in my expression immediately. "Is it him?" he asked quietly. I froze. The phone buzzed again, and for the first time, I did not feel embarrassed that he knew the answer. The phone continued vibrating against my apron pocket. Once, twice, then silence. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. Across the table, Damian remained perfectly calm. He did not ask another question. He did not pressure me. Somehow that made it harder to breathe. Most people filled silence with opinions. Damian filled it with patience. "You should answer it," he said eventually. I stared at the untouched coffee pot in my hand. "Why?" "Because avoiding something does not make it disappear." The words settled heavily between us. Before I could respond, my manager called my name from across the dining room. Duty arrived like a lifeline. "I have to work." Damian nodded once. "Of course." I escaped toward the kitchen before the conversation could continue. For the next hour, I buried myself in orders and refills. Anything to avoid thinking. Anything to avoid looking toward table 12. Yet every time I passed through the dining room, I could feel his presence. Not watching, not hovering, simply there, steady, unmoved. Around 10 o'clock, my shift finally ended. The moment I stepped into the employee locker room, I pulled out my phone. 7 missed calls. For messages. My stomach tightened. The last message was simple. "We need to talk tonight." I sat on the bench and rubbed my eyes. Exhaustion pressed against me from every direction. Classes, work, bills, expectations. I was tired of carrying everything. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit it. I was tired. When I finally left Bellamy's, the streets were quiet. Rain from earlier had left the sidewalks shining beneath the city lights. I wrapped my coat tighter and started toward the subway station. A black sedan waited across the street. I recognized it immediately. The passenger window lowered slightly. Damian sat inside. "You have a habit of appearing unexpectedly," I said when I reached the curb. A faint smile touched his face. "And you have a habit of pretending you are not struggling." I should have walked away. Instead, I found myself standing there. "What if I do not want help?" I asked. Damian considered the question carefully. "Then I will respect that." His answer surprised me. "That's simple." "Yes." He held my gaze. Help only matters when it is accepted freely. The city hummed around us. Distant traffic. A siren somewhere far away. Life moving forward. "Then why are you still here?" I asked softly. For the first time since I had met him, something shifted behind his eyes. Not sadness exactly. Memory. "Because someone should have stayed for my mother," he said quietly. The words hit me like cold air. He looked away toward the windshield. People saw signs. People noticed. Nobody said anything. I could not speak. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The flowers. The messages. The questions. He was not trying to save me. He was trying to prevent history from repeating itself. Damian looked back at me. I could not help her. His voice remained calm, but I heard the truth beneath it. "That does not mean I have to ignore what I see now." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then my phone buzzed again. Another call. The screen lit up in my hand. Damian glanced at it, and then back at me. "You do not have to answer tonight." I looked down at the glowing screen. Then I pressed decline. For the first time in a very long time, the decision felt like mine. The next morning felt different. Not dramatically different. The city was still loud. My apartment was still small. My student loans still existed. Yet something inside me had shifted during that conversation. For the first time in years, I had made a choice because it was what I wanted, not because it was what someone else expected. I arrived at class carrying a coffee and an unfamiliar feeling. Relief. It was fragile, temporary, but it was there. The day passed quickly. Lectures, notes, practice scenarios. The normal rhythm of a life I had worked hard to build. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. Not a call, not a message, an email. The subject line contained only my name. My stomach tightened immediately. For a moment, I considered deleting it unopened. Instead, I took a breath and read it. The message was surprisingly short. Olivia, I know you need space. I will respect that. I genuinely hope you find happiness. Ethan. That was all. No guilt. No pressure. No demands. Just a few simple sentences. I stared at the screen for almost a minute. Then I closed the email and slipped my phone back into my bag. When class ended, I found myself walking through Central Park instead of rushing home. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees. Children laughed near the fountain. Dogs chased tennis balls across the grass. Ordinary moments. The kind I had stopped noticing a long time ago. My phone buzzed again. This time I smiled before checking it. Damian, how was your day? I shook my head. The man owned half of Manhattan and somehow still found time to send messages that sounded like they came from a concerned neighbor. Better, I replied. Several minutes passed before his answer arrived. Good. You deserve more of those. The simplicity of the message warmed something inside me. Not because it was romantic. It was not. It was something rarer. Genuine. That evening, after my shift ended, I stepped outside Bellamy's and immediately noticed the familiar black sedan parked across the street. The passenger window lowered. Are you stalking me? I asked as I approached. Damian actually laughed. A real laugh. Brief, but unmistakable. I prefer persistent concern. That sounds equally suspicious. His smile remained. Get in. I owe you dinner. I hesitated. Why? Because every time I see you, you are either working, studying, or worrying. He opened the passenger door from inside. I would like evidence that you know how to do something else. 20 minutes later, we sat at a small Italian restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. No bodyguards. No business associates. Just dinner. The sunset painted the water gold outside the windows. For the first time, I saw Damian without the armor. Not the powerful businessman. Not the intimidating figure everyone whispered about. Just a man carrying old regrets and trying to make peace with them. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Childhood stories. School memories. Favorite books. Ridiculous professors. Nothing important. Somehow everything important. At one point I caught him watching me. What? I asked. Damian shook his head slightly. You smile more now. The words caught me off guard. I looked down at my untouched dessert. Maybe I forgot I could. His expression softened. Then I am glad you remembered. And for the first time since meeting Damian Romano, I realized the safest place I had felt in years was sitting across a dinner table from a man who never once asked me to become someone other than myself. 3 months later, I stood on the stage of the nursing school auditorium with my graduation cap balanced carefully on my head and my heart racing faster than it had during any final exam. The room glowed beneath bright lights. Families filled every row. Cameras flashed. Proud voices echoed through the crowd. For years, this moment had existed only as a distant dream. Something I chased between double shifts, late-night study sessions, and mornings when exhaustion felt heavier than hope. Now it was real. When my name was called, I walked across the stage and accepted my diploma with trembling hands. Applause filled the room. I smiled. A real smile. Not the practiced one I used at work. Not the careful one I used when I wanted everyone to think I was fine. This one came from somewhere deeper. After the ceremony ended, graduates spilled into the lobby. Flowers appeared everywhere. Parents hugged their children. Friends posed for photographs. The entire building seemed brighter than usual. I spotted Damian immediately. He stood near the entrance holding a bouquet of white lilies. The same flowers he had sent weeks earlier. The same flowers that had arrived with a simple message that changed everything. When our eyes met, his expression softened. Congratulations, Nurse Carter. I laughed. Not officially until I passed the licensing exam. You will. His confidence sounded absolute. Like he had never considered another possibility. He handed me the flowers. I am proud of you. The words hit harder than I expected. For a second, I could not speak. Then I hugged him. The gesture surprised both of us. But neither stepped away. Later that evening, we walked along the Hudson River as the sun disappeared behind the skyline. The water reflected gold and orange light. Boats drifted slowly across the surface. The city felt peaceful in a way I had never noticed before. Maybe because I finally felt peaceful too. We stopped near a quiet bench overlooking the river. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. We simply watched the water. Then Damian turned toward me. Can I ask you something? I smiled. You usually do. He nodded thoughtfully. When was the last time someone asked if you were okay before all of this started? The question settled over us gently. Months ago, I would have avoided answering. Months ago, I would have laughed it off. This time I told the truth. I do not remember. Damian looked down briefly. I understood why. Because that answer hurt. Not just for me. For him too. You know, I said softly. One question changed everything. His eyes met mine. I continued. The night you asked who caused that bruise, I thought you were asking about my wrist. A faint smile appeared on his face. And I was. No. I shook my head. You were asking whether I was still willing to accept a life that made me unhappy. Silence followed. Comfortable silence. The kind that exists between people who no longer need to hide. Damian reached for my hand. This time I let him. The city lights flickered to life around us. Cars moved across distant streets. The river continued its steady journey toward the sea. Life moved forward. So did we. And as I sat beside the man who had noticed what everyone else overlooked, I realized something simple. Sometimes healing begins with courage. Sometimes it begins with kindness. And sometimes it begins with one person looking at you and asking the question nobody else was brave enough to ask.